Legacy order management systems are applications sitting on top of a database. And a central problem is they demand to be the system of record. Everything has to come through them. And the integrations from the OMS to third-party systems, many times there are dozens of connections to selling channels, to back office systems of record, to fulfillment. If any one of them breaks, that becomes every single user of that OMS's problem to go fix it.
Welcome, Ecom Logistics Nation. Today, we're diving into a really powerful conversation that goes deeper than the latest tech buzz that you are all surrounded by. This is going to be about operational systems that either scale with your business or quietly sabotage it. We're joined by Afshar. He is a CEO and co-founder of Pipe 17. He brings decades of experience in scaling cloud infrastructure and intelligent systems. Next up, we have Kelly Goetsch, COO of Pipe 17, bringing his architectural clarity and modular thinking to operational workflows. Welcome, both of you, to the episode. Thank you so much for joining us.
Great to be here, guys.
Thank you very
Thanks
much
for having us.
Thank you.
Let's start off by having you guys do a quick intro and tell our audience about your journey so far and what brought you to the point that you're at.
Absolutely. Great to be with you guys once again. I'm an avid listener to the podcast. So I spent kind of all my career in enterprise software space, big company, small company, starting companies, scaling companies, selling companies, and then being at big companies. And I think one of the really interesting things I learned from that, from an e-commerce perspective, is that operations is hard. Whether you're running a data center, whether you're running an application infrastructure, and it's even harder if you're running a commerce business because you have physical goods. So this fascination that I've always had with making things easy and operations found a beautiful marriage in commerce and operations where there is a plethora of problems that need to be solved. With that angle, we got excited and we built Pipe 17.
Love it. Kelly?
I started my career with ATG, which was the leading commerce platform back in the 90s and 2000s. Spent some quality time at Walmart as their chief ATG architect, went to work more on the infrastructure underneath e-commerce, just as Oracle was getting its cloud started, and then spent 8.5 years at Commerce Tools, where I was CPO for 5.5 years, and then CSO for the last couple. And I spent most of my career to date in the order capture side of the business. And back when I was just getting started, it was actually pretty difficult to build a full enterprise website. And everything was hard-coded and there was no concept of headless commerce. It was a very manual, labor-intensive thing to build out a website. And over time, I saw the capture side of e-commerce becoming a lot easier, right? Mm-hmm. That's not where the problem is anymore. And what drew me into Pipe 17 was the opportunity to fundamentally change the post-order capture, because right now it's just straight up order management, and order management systems are old, antiquated. Just like when I started at Commerce Tools, I saw legacy commerce platforms. I saw ATG, WebSphere Commerce, Hybris, all these old school commerce platforms that had served their purpose. They had been in market for 20, 25 years at that point. And along we came Commerce Tools with headless commerce, invented Mock, and I co-founded the Mock Alliance and ran that for many years, right? It's a whole new way of doing something. And I saw the same thing at Pipe 17, which was ditching these legacy OMSs that have ruled the world for so long.
Mm-hmm. Let's start with the foundations. Mo and Kelly, between all of your experiences in scaling enterprise platforms and driving composable architecture and commerce, you've both seen where the real friction lies in terms of the fundamental flaw. And Kelly, I'll use the term that you've come up with and are trying to build a category around, which is order ops. What is the flaw in the way order ops has been traditionally handled, and how should more modern brands be rethinking that layer to support their growth, agility, and real-time execution for the future?
Yeah. I can start this one off. This goes back to the founding of Pipe 17. So after selling my last company, I spent about a couple of years within the private equity space, and we did a bunch of investments. When we started digging further, we realized that there is this unitary fundamental problem, which is around connecting and then orchestrate that people haven't thought about properly. And then we thought more and more about it, and we said, so what does the right solution look like here? Ideally, one that connects everything up, orchestrate your data flows, doesn't require developers or an army of developers to get working, gives you the outcomes that you need, which is my orders flow and stuff gets fulfilled. I don't have to pray. And it works predictably at low cost.
And if I look at it a little bit more architecturally, legacy order management systems are applications sitting on top of a database. And a central problem is they demand to be the system of record. Everything has to come through them. And the integrations from the OMS to third-party systems, many times there are dozens of connections to selling channels, to back office systems of record, to fulfillment. If any one of them breaks, right, if UPS changes their API, that becomes every single user of that OMS's problem to go fix it. And as we've seen with Shopify, they've been making changes for months to their APIs, breaking changes as they switch over to GraphQL.
Yep.
And we have a full-time engineer just doing that. What's key about our approach is we're network-centric. We approach connectivity from a network centricity standpoint. And the benefit of that is we make these changes in one place. And we also don't have to be the system of record. And we can be, and sometimes we are. What's great about a network-based approach is if we're pushing out inventory updates to every node in the system that needs to subscribe to the data, we're approaching this not from an app connected to a database standpoint that has to be the center of the world. Instead, it's much more of a Stripe approach with an abstraction layer over the top of a giant network.
Yeah. That's kind of the ask, right? Like it's moving away from that N-tier architecture mindset of basically saying it's a commerce system, then the OMS, and then the fulfillment system, and then everything's got to flow back through or add an ERP in between, where is that abstraction orchestration kind of residing to manage all of those pieces? And we looked at the problem. Where's the opportunity? There are, at an enterprise level, or also now very easily accessible, not iPaaS, right? Like integration platforms as a service that can take A and connect to B. Great. The true game changer is when you combine with the iPaaS the capability to say, now I have that data domain understanding. I know what an order actually means. It's not just a translation. That changes so much of your business, but I still act all around me to be able to integrate into anything and be able to plug into anything. You can use me not just to pass the order through. One of the areas that annoys me a lot is the fact that if I want to make a commitment on my shopping channel, right, that if you place an order right now, it will be done by X point. Most of the traditional systems have had a difficulty doing that. What Amazon was able to do is that abstraction and orchestration being missing. It's like going from commerce down to where is my inventory, doing a soft allocation, coming back up, saying, okay, now I can make a commitment, take that commitment, pass it down, and then make sure that that commitment's kind of flowing through. So who's doing that orchestration? N-tier does not solve for that, no matter what you do. Is that what you guys are doing?
Yes. I think fundamentally the orchestration is key here, but you need to be able to connect to things before you can orchestrate them. And you need to be able to get data from the backend systems in order to make the right set of decisions. So if you can't connect to backend systems, can't get the data pseudo real time, it's kind of hard to figure out where should this order really go, right? And based on the customer's SLAs and various other things. So I think that kind of fundamental understanding of we need to solve the connection problem, we need to orchestrate, and we need it to be data rich. And doing it in a way that is, as Kelly said, network based, which is you're not connecting things point to point. Everything connects to us and we can connect to anything. That network concept becomes more and more powerful over time. So that is what we're doing.
Amazing. So transitioning right from that point, at the beginning, I want to do a deeper dig in, specifically, Kelly, because you were such a big part of the MAC Alliance, right? I'm the logistics guy that actually looks at commerce as a touch point. And what I've found is there is this touch point of ours, which is the commerce ecosystem, which has the MAC Alliance and the ability to create this composable environment to say it can be headless, it can operate in any way, you can use us in any way that you want, and I'm giving you everything. I have found it to be a struggle on the logistics side. If you go down to that WMS layer, you go down to the shipping layers as an example, you are still not seeing as much of that adoption on that front, right? And so why don't we kind of like touch on like, why does this disconnect still persist, right? Like, so the entire ecosystem is not solved for, right? There is a part that is solved, or at least there is a good adoption on that front. So maybe just to educate people and then move from your perspective, right? Like,
maybe let's talk about the problem, right? And then that way we can bring it to kind of why has it not happened yet? So if you look at the fundamental problem, consumers are buying on more and more channels. As a retailer and a brand, I need to meet those consumers where they are. right? Which might be on social, increasingly with AI, and we know this a lot of discovery is going to happen. So your website, your .com becomes part of your selling portfolio, right? So that introduces a whole bunch of complexity on the channel side. If you go back to what happened in the logistics world, let's say I'm a 3PL or a 4PL, I go to a customer and I say, I would like to service you. And the customer says, well, I need to take B2B orders and I need to take direct orders. And by the way, I need to take marketplace orders. And I need to do drop ship. The technology gap is too wide between what the brands and retailers need and what the 3PLs and the 4PLs are armed to do. This problem is only going to get deeper. Kelly mentioned the API changes and GraphQL, which means that logistics providers have to keep revving to keep up with the arms race that the brands and retailers necessarily require. And that is, as a side, one of the reasons why we work a lot with logistics providers is because we help them bridge that gap, whether you're UPS or FedEx or anybody else. So the reality of it is the first thing to realize the problems are getting deeper. The second thing is, at the end of the day, you have a lot of legacy and custom systems in this space. So when I started looking at this logistics space, right, in the composable space, you have 10, 20, 30 vendors. They have their APIs. In the logistics world, you have tens of thousands of logistics providers and probably double the number of warehouse management systems. Each of them has at least two, right? So you've got a lot of complexity on heterogeneity within the systems. There is legacy to deal with. We all know that EDI continues to be a thing, and it will be. The combination of heterogeneity and legacy have made it incredibly hard to standardize this whole backend from a composability perspective. But we're doing some interesting things to address that on our end, and I'll let Kelly dive into those.
So we're doing quite a few things around composability. We're exposing all of our data and functionality up through individually consumable APIs. So it's about packaged business capabilities. And we're meant to play in this much larger ecosystem of individually consumable applications. We're very much continuing with the principles of MOC and the MOC Alliance. And I think composable is more of the business-centric view, the business-level view here of how you consume this data and functionality. Yeah. Just about any software you build today is going to follow MOC principles by default.
Yeah, but if I was to get a little deeper on that, right, to the point that you made, that all of these newer systems, right, like so Shopify comes around, APIs are easily accessible, right, like that's what they built the platform on. Previous to that, we didn't have APIs and we were dealing with XML flows and asynchronous flows. That was the state of the union. And companies are built around this. Global trade is still represented over 80% by these EDIs flying back and forth. So the ecosystem, and again, I respect the ecosystem of Shopify and everything that happens. But guys, it's like 1% of 2/3 of nothing when it compares to the global trade ecosystem. And so the supply chain systems that operate in this environment are a very different beast. The good news is there is a digital transformation wave that is ongoing. It's been going on for a while, but of course, this new wave is bringing in newer systems and newer applications. And Kelly, to the point you're making, is the adoption of composable architecture specifically. And that's what every architect is talking about today. If you're designing a new system, is how do I make that happen? How do you view that side of the universe? Because to the point that Mo made, you are dealing more with the logistics companies and their problems, right? With a brand, you might add a new channel once every 3 months, but you could be a logistics provider adding new channels and new EDIs and new ways of doing things. You have dedicated integration organization in most cases, right? How do you see this all evolve in the composable space? Are you seeing it evolve in that much more complex environment?
Well, first, if you look at global trade and actually just ChatGPT, it's $33 trillion. Which is an obscene amount of money by any measure. I don't think we have grand ambitions to disrupt $33 trillion in global trade. As much as I would love to kill off EDI, the big surprise I had in joining Pipe 17, the number one thing, was how absolutely dominant EDI still is.
Yeah.
Which absolutely blows my mind how dysfunctional
because it just
all of
works.
EDI is. Except when it doesn't. One of the things I did as part of onboarding was really define how we're approaching EDI going forward and our go-forward strategy. And it's been an eye-opening experience for me to learn about that. But EDI is much more for suppliers behind the scenes. If you're buying steel for a bridge, if you're buying 100,000 bolts, if you're buying, tractors, right? That's where EDI makes more sense. And what we're looking at B2C and B2B facing e-commerce. It's those brands, the .coms, the marketplace channels, the nuts and bolts of an organization or a person buying something digitally. And that's a much smaller section of global trade. Yeah. Longer term, we would love to disrupt EDI. But for the time being, I think we're going to stay in our lane. It's plenty big enough for the next decade plus. Forrester puts the TAM of OMS spend every year at roughly $15 billion, which is pretty substantial. And people stay with their OMSs for a long time. So 15 billion is spent annually, but there's a much larger ecosystem of software out there that will come out over the next couple decades.
So if you look at, as I mentioned earlier, we work with a lot of logistics providers and started talking to a number of them. And a number of them has started to build out this data layer, right? Which essentially is the data layer that they use for all their customers. The idea is there's a canonical data model. All the orders from all the customers flow into that data layer, and then they connect it to their logistics network. And their strategy over time is, if you look at fulfillment, is kind of the end of the chain, but it's to start going kind of fundamentally back, right? Keep on going back to where the goods actually originate over time, and use that data layer as a mechanism to facilitate better decision-making. We know that's really important because a lot of things happening out there. We have started to see this trend where people have started to compose things themselves in order to address this problem of the end-to-end supply chain and the visibility through it. What we're doing is we have a data layer that we built over the last 5 years, and that will be extended further down the supply chain. Our hope is that these customers who use us will get much better understanding of where things are, not only on the end chain where fulfillment flows, but also through to when things are manufactured over time. And as Kelly said, there's a big problem to solve now, so we can solve that. The point around people wanting to compose and plug in systems together to get better data is real. And it kind of hasn't happened. Companies like us are trying to make it happen, but it's a little bit of a lift.
And the shift is happening, right? To a point where, there's companies like us, there's companies like, for as an example, that's actually disrupting the EDI space, right? You take those things into combination, and Kelly, maybe it's an opportunity for a different alliance that actually speaks to this. And I actually advocated for it for a while, is the opportunity to come together and look at composability in the logistics space. Of course, not the $33 trillion side of the equation, but at least flow into North America. All you need is a couple of big players to say, this is the new rule set to play by.
Yeah, I know the Mock Alliance is looking to get into fulfillment and logistics space more broadly. We at Pipe 17 have donated our data model. The advantage of that is anybody, whether brand or manufacturer, anybody in the ecosystem can pick that up off the shelf and use it. And what's great about our data model is it's already optimized for these types of use cases. It's much more order management, back office. It deals with all the complexities of B2C and B2B e-commerce.
The right next topic for us to talk about is around AI. Your entire team has been able to launch something called Pippen, which is an AI agent that is robust and already works really well. I'd love to hear your perspective on how AI can help folks within logistics and the vision behind what you've built so far.
So stepping back, I use AI all the time, all throughout my day. I know my family does as well. And it's really replaced Google. It's where a lot of product discovery is happening these days. So I believe the web is slowly dying. I think it's going to be with us for a long time yet, but I do believe it's dying. And we're going to see much more AI shopping in the ChatGPTs of the world. It's better. You can find the products you're looking for. Eventually, that's going to get polluted with ads and GDPR notices and all the nasty stuff that's polluted the web as we know it today. So I have no illusions about that. But I do see a lot more AI-based shopping. And if you really step back and look at where we are as an industry, do you remember when cloud became a thing? Every legacy vendor in the world slapped the label cloud over whatever old garbage they were selling, and suddenly they were cloud-based products. What they were, it was managed services, right? It was managed hosting. And that's fine. But if you go back to 2009, 2010, all of the vendors that were really dominant at that point, except for a handful, they've all been replaced by new vendors, actual native SaaS vendors. And I think the same thing is happening now with software generally, right? We see a lot of existing legacy vendors, whether SaaS or otherwise, starting to add AI features. And they're adding those features off to the side of their product. So if you pull up the ups.com tracking page, you'll see an obnoxious Clippy style chatbot off to the side. I think the UI should work well enough that a chatbot isn't necessary, right? It shouldn't paper over deficiencies in an existing experience. It should be a fundamental part of the experience. And I think over time, the AI native vendors out there are going to just entirely supplant the legacy vendors in the same way that cloud native vendors, SaaS vendors, supplanted many of the legacy vendors out there.
I think this to that point you're making, Kelly. Beyond shopping, right? So shopping's here now. ChatGPT just made some massive moves. I'm not even asking about shopping, and all of a sudden they're telling me things that I don't want to buy, right? I'm researching something else. Why are you actually talking about this right now? But on the other front, with the whole Google scenario on the Chrome side playing out, that's going to have an impact on the market, and it's probably going to be one of the AI players that comes in and scoops that up. But there is the SaaS side equation. That thing you said, that the AI native, I kind of have a general sense of what it might look like. It's for the traditionals, right? Like that's a scary time, right? You made a comment that resonates so much with me on a LinkedIn post recently, which was about, building a $10 million ARR business with just a few people is now possible with AI. I can tell you, I use AI to its extent at this point, right? Like goes way beyond from a utilization of an LLM. Personally, I can tell you the things it can do. I can see the type of companies that are coming, and it's going to be threat to a lot of incumbents. Again, good for the business, but not good for a lot of businesses. If you don't evolve, you're going to be in trouble.
It's creative destruction. This has happened every decade of tech, going back to the 90s, 80s. That's the way the world works. And someday, 20 years from now, somebody's going to come up with a better pipes, and that's okay. That's how the world works.
One thing, Ninaad, you said that's really interesting. If we touch upon what you said around composability and what's holding that back within the logistics and the back end. I think we talked about complexity, we talked about heterogeneity, but one of the things, this is an area where AI really helps. Because fundamentally, you can use AI to overcome a lot of that muscle work related to heterogeneity. Now, obviously, you can't point AI at like stuff out there and say, build me a connector for Ninaad's favorite logistics company today that actually works. AI and the connector you've built, like we've got hundreds and hundreds of connectors, are saying, can you try and build me one for this new logistics provider based on the ones that you have? So I think there's some really interesting things that we can do and everybody can do with AI to help address the fundamental challenge of heterogeneity and complexity.
Absolutely. We spoke about you having that differentiation of not just being an integration platform, but also having that data domain understanding. Well, you might not be able to today contextually say, build it to that new platform, but today you can internally go, hey, here's my context window for my data model schema. And now here's the open API spec for those guys. Let's build the service component that's necessary to do the translation into that. Guess what? That just went from 2 weeks of development effort to 5 minutes of testable code.
Amazing.
If anyone can see me, that was me doing that. Mind is equal to blown. Yes.
That's an amazing opportunity, but it does enable a lot of that complexity on the logistics side to be fundamentally changed. And that's a good thing for all of us because we want the ecosystem to run more efficiently for everybody's benefit.
Tell us more about Pippen.
In one sense, what is Pippen? It's an agent that sits in Pipe 17 that a customer can use to set up the system. So, hey, these are the things I want to connect to. This is how I want orders to flow. And the system will give you the initial setup. And then you say, hey, do you want me to run orders through it? Do you want me to run test orders? So we've really gone to the life cycle of how does the customer live with Pipe 17 and applied AI to make that simpler. The setup, the day-to-day operations, the exception management, because we have customers who have, I won't say 100, but certainly 50, 60, 70 people sitting in the Philippines trying to manage exceptions. Well, that's something that AI can really help with. So I think for us, the focus initially was on making it super easy for customers to get leverage from the platform and use it. The other area is around getting the platform to optimize the way it works. Fulfillment is one of those things that can optimize. Ninaad, you talked about the delivery promise being an angle of that, but really taking the data within the system and the customer requirements to figure out what we should do with our orders, where we should put things within the logistics network. And those are things that learning can really help with as well. So in essence, kind of is a two-faceted thing. Help it easy to work with the product and get it to work much better for shippers, resellers, retailers, etc.
And longer term, we have hundreds of millions of orders flowing through our network on a daily basis. And we already used AI-based routing for, fastest delivery time, lowest cost, things like that. But we're starting to incorporate AI-based routing around things like, if there's a storm coming in Memphis, what does that do to FedEx?
Yep.
Or this 3PL seems to really be responding slowly and shipping out packages slowly, right? Maybe we should be routing around that 3PL if there's another choice. So we can really start to use AI meaningfully to make better informed routing decisions. And that, again, is a benefit of being network-centric.
I'm actually going to tie in a data point here, guys. I think it was McKinsey that's mentioned 70% of AI pilots in supply chain fail because of data issues. It's not the model performance or anything like that, but it's the data piece that we keep coming back to. It's such a foundational piece, and being able to connect the data in the right way and making sure that it actually flows is a step that a lot of people get wrong.
Yeah.
Yes, garbage in, garbage out. The old adage, whether it was mainframe or AI. If you don't have the right data, you're not going to have the right learning.
I think a lot of people,
inefficiency.
Like the two examples, Kelly, that you just mentioned, right? Like most of those are like machine learning AI type of ideas, right? And they have been around for a while, and there is that level of maturity that it's gained. But what's starting to happen, to the point that Harshida was also making, is like this LLM adoption. And again, everything gets conflated with AI as just one big word, right? But with LLM adoption itself, at an enterprise level, the failures happen is there is this broad vision and the promise is too big, and then it ends up not fulfilling the promise. Where we see the highest value is the low-hanging fruit opportunities. Solve a small problem. The practicality right now is the agent space. You do an agent that solves a given problem, billing automation or something of that nature, right? Well, the ROI use cases on most of these things are literally 300% within the same year. It's quick. Go in, solve for the problem. And then it's like the bigger things. And it seems like you took the knowledge, the information, and it is more agentic type of approach that you have applied at this point.
Sure. In general, what I would say is if you look at Pippen and the way we're devolving our agent, it's there to be the ops or commerce personnel's best friend. And over time, it's going to do more things for the ops person, which is less spreadsheets, more agents doing work on behalf of people. And that's something we absolutely see happening.
This idea, because what you just said, the personification of your own AI, right? Like from a branding perspective, that personification is such a key element, right? Like it's not just with AI, right? Like, and look, under the hood, you can do like 30 different AI technologies to actually bring it together. That makes a big difference is what I observe in the market. So kudos to you guys.
The other conversations I'd love to dive into is just the complexity that modern brands have to deal with. They're across all these different marketplaces. They're selling wholesale, retail. They got to figure out the whole B2B space, and there's different SLAs and routing and compliance demands. It's not just more channels, there's so much more added complexity with each one they're adding on. So what shifts operationally when a brand expands beyond just direct to consumer and goes into these channels?
So imagine if your brand is Allbirds, right? You're selling on Shopify and you have a fulfillment provider. Obviously, they have many now, but you start out with that. Easy, right? You connect Shopify to a fulfillment provider. Somebody builds a connector. Shopify change their APIs. They go and fix it. But of course, that's not the way businesses succeed these days. You got to meet consumers where they are. So not only are they online, but they're in store. We talked about AI, they're increasingly on AI. And then you got to sell through retailers and in marketplaces. People like Uber started selling on Amazon, a while back. So there is so many channels to collect orders from. So the first complexity is really around, okay, we've got to collect all these orders from all these different locations, right? And then the second thing is consumers, they want stuff instantly. When you're buying something on TikTok Shop, you're not going to wait 2 weeks, right, for the stuff to arrive. That is hell for logistics, right? Which is, you got to figure out, how do I get this to you? So either you put it in one warehouse and you say, I don't want to deal with complexity, and you pay crazy costs on the shipping side, or you try to optimize how that works by really funneling all of your orders into a single location and then optimizing the way those orders are distributed across your network, which is the increasingly complex problem that everybody has to solve. Then you got to plug in ERPs, and then you got to plug in data lakes, and some people got to plug in POS. It just gets more and more complicated and hard to do unless you have some technology to help you with it.
Yeah. And then it gets down to the warehouse level. I don't think a lot of people have the appreciation for this particular fact is a direct-to-consumers operations for warehousing and a B2B case, a pallet in, case out type operation are so different that just because you have the same product sitting inside the same building, and if you are small doing 100 orders a day and 2 cases a day, it's a different conversation. But when you get to the larger scale and to try and manage that omni-channel inventory, omni-channel and its realization and how complex it becomes, because that is the part that a lot of people miss. And then when you get all the compliance side equation that comes into play, right? Target wants their pallet to be so high and the label to be right side up on the left side, and Walmart wants it in this way. And if you don't follow through with all of that, you can get up to 20% compliance hit on your invoice. Well, that's a very painful exercise to go through, my friend. So,
everybody pays chargebacks. But yes, you said they're very different worlds, the whole B2B world and DTC world. And having a technology unified for retailers and brands is kind of important, but also for the logistics providers. And
this has been such a great conversation. And obviously, you guys are making some great moves. I'd love to pose the last question. Let's make this one a lightning round. What you're excited about over the next year and what operational leaders should be having on their radar.
I'm excited about the proliferation of selling channels. It used to be just web.com was the only one. Now we see so many channels. Here's an interesting stat. Amazon, Walmart, Costco, Temu, Shein, and TikTok accounted for 62% of all US retail growth last year. So folks are not paying more money to drive consumers to their brand.com and the hellscape that is the modern web. Instead, they're trying to reach consumers where they're at in these apps. And instead, they're investing to reach those consumers there as opposed to driving them back to their .coms. And I love that trend. I think we're going to see a lot more of it. I see social media especially as being a big thing in the coming decades. And over time, I think we're going to look much more like China, where there are a few super apps at scale.
I think there is one more layer. We spoke about agents on the shopping side targeting me. I think there's going to be personal shopping agents shopping on my behalf as an individual. The channel is going to become irrelevant at that point, right? Like, this is my budget. This is what I like. This is what I need to spend. Here's an event coming up for which I need a dress, and it's just going to place an order, make sure it's there on time. That is also going to be a very big evolution on that side, like how that gets architected. Cool times coming ahead.
Were you going to add some perspective?
The lightning round, as you said, what's keeping everybody up is the tariffs. And that introduces a lot of uncertainty. There are a lot of models that people are trying, from bonded warehouse to FTZ. They're getting the manufacturers to import things, pay the tariffs. There's going to be a lot of change and a lot of pressure on the way people work. I think one thing we do know is that there will be more need for logistics in the US. There's going to be more fulfillment done out of the US than anywhere else, which everybody has to think about what that means for them. So that's what's keeping us up at night.
Agreed.
Love it. Great point. I will have you guys share with our audience where they can keep up with you on socials and where they can learn more about Pipe 17 as well.
Pipe17.com with the latest and greatest. And also we're on LinkedIn, Twitter, and various other social channels. We are putting out a lot of content from our customers around how they're dealing with tariffs and webinars. We're doing one on the 20th of May. And we always love to have practitioners talk about how they're solving problems. We're here to help from a technology perspective, but we know they've got big problems to solve.
Great.
All right. Well, thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.